Depression has this image of just being calm, which I think, unfortunately, makes it easy to conflate with weakness. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Depression is strong. It is relentless, and it is sneaky. So you have a person who understands that their brain's playing tricks on them and telling them there's no point in going on and they should give up, but they can see it. They are like, nope, I'm better than this. I've got a lot to live for.
Want to understand how to keep living and loving after unimaginable loss? Today, I'm joined by Betsy Stephenson, a veteran crisis communications expert who in just 6 weeks lost her son to suicide, her mother-in-law to dementia, and their family dog to cancer. Instead of being consumed by grief, Betsy faced it with heroic courage and brutal honesty. Her memoir, Blackbird, isn't a how-to guide. It's a how-I story of surviving the unthinkable. We talk about the lies depression tells, the guilt and the endless what-ifs that come after suicide, and how grief impacts every member of the family differently. We also explore the small, courageous steps that helped Betsy find her footing again, how to find the delicate balance between grieving in your own way, on your own time, and taking action every day by doing little things that terrify you in order to move forward. Betsy, thank you so much for coming on Heal with Kelly to share your story.
Thank you for having me.
So Blackbird, a mother's reflections on grief, loss, and life after suicide. I was like a mess reading this book. I laughed reading this book. You are a phenomenal writer. I just want to start off by saying that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Did you know you were a good writer before? Is that it's kind of your job or no?
I hoped I was, and I did try. There are a lot of reasons to write a memoir after loss or tragedy or big life changes. One of them is obviously to untangle the complicated feelings and emotions we have. Getting things on paper is really powerful and useful. But I did, as the more I got into it, I did treat it as like an actual writing exercise, thinking about the end product, thinking about what I wanted the reader experience to be like. So I challenged myself to make sure that I was not just putting all my emotions on the page, that I was taking people through my experience and giving them certainly the information they needed, but I wanted them to be with me on that journey. And so that required me to really test my writing skills. And so I'm glad that, that came across when you read it.
Absolutely. It's really poignant, actually, the way you do that. So, and this is not just a book about, this is about your journey of losing your son and your dog and your mother-in-law. But obviously mostly your son, Charlie, who is just a beautiful human from the photos that you shared and the stories you shared. So I guess just give us a story, and why you wrote Blackbird.
So, Charlie is my youngest child. He has two older sisters. And 3 years ago, at the age of 21, he took his life. He hung himself. He was in his college town, living in a group house that he'd lived in all year. He was surrounded by friends. He'd been out the night before. He'd been counseling friends the night before about, if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed out, don't worry, it's going to go away. It doesn't last. And so his death was a huge shock. And we knew he had been struggling. It was really about 11 weeks between the time that we learned he was first having thoughts of self-harm and when he died. And that is a remarkably fast and dangerous timeline, because when we learned that he was having thoughts of self-harm, we were on it. I flew to Texas overnight. I was there when the sun came up. I was with him for a week in a hotel room, learning things about him that I did not know. I did not know that he'd been struggling. I did not know he'd put himself in therapy and hadn't told anybody. I did not know that he had called the campus crisis line. Like, this was news to me. But when we did learn all these things, we took it very seriously. He took it very seriously. He was in therapy. We were in constant contact with him. He was making plans. We saw him. He lived in Texas and we lived in Virginia, but we saw him. He came home several times. We went to him. And still, in 11 weeks, while getting help, while making plans, while preparing for the future, the lies, depression's lies, became too loud, and he just couldn't take it anymore. Yeah. And so there was a lot of shock associated with this loss, and as a result, it forced me to look very closely at myself, at our family, at him. And I knew the only way I could heal is if I made grief my job, and if I made healing a process that I integrated into my life. Still, it's only been 3 years. I mean, it's still every day. The healing continues. And from that, there are a lot of stories. There are a lot of things that we have learned and perspective gained, and that has come together in this book, Blackbird.
Yeah. It's really, I think one of the most profound things is that he was making plans with his sisters. He was counseling a good friend hours before. He was seemingly okay, and I don't think there's anything worse than losing a child. I can't imagine. I have a 6-year-old, as well as anybody, and if not better, that like the minute you have a child, just these like horrific images come into your mind of the worst case scenarios from a baby. And you're just like in constant, like, why do we even become parents? It's so torturing,
And I can tell you, I'm right there with you. My mind has been filled for the 27 years that I've been a parent with all the bad things that can happen to my child. And that motivates us, and that propels us to take care of ourselves, to protect them, and to surround them with support and love. And when the worst happens, I can say it is so much worse than I ever thought it would be. And I think from day one, I decided to spend no energy fighting that. It was not about making it better or even feeling better. It was about healing, because nothing could change the fact that he was gone, and nothing could change that we will always miss him, and we always wonder, and we have regrets and questions. And so take that information and really do whatever you can at whatever stage of growth, healing, anger, frustration you are, and learn to live with it, work with it. It's uncomfortable, it's messy, but it has made a huge difference. Because if you can't be, I think, brutally honest about the hardest thing in your life, whatever that is, then you can't heal.
Absolutely. And to feel it fully. I mean, we are conditioned in society from a very young age to suppress our feelings. And my whole work right now is learning how to feel, like relearning how to feel, to be a conscious parent and reflect back to our kids from a young age, like what they're feeling, to give them that language, and then to hold space so that they can sit in their feelings. Like, we were never taught that as a kid. And so I'm 46 years later, like just learning how to feel and be with my emotions. And I think that you just do such a beautiful job of describing how you did that. in the messy ways. I love how you have these Charlie's Angels, your community that supported you and helped you through by doing all the things that you just simply couldn't do. And you were like, they would stop by unannounced, and I didn't care. I was like a full blown mess, an unkempt house, and that's all I could muster, and that's okay. Like you really give people the mirror to how to just be in that feeling and not have to figure it out or push through or whatever that is. And it's a beautiful thing that you shared.
Well, I thank you. It's interesting because there is a little balance. And so I don't think I've ever been one to like hide my feelings or suppress or pretend. But when you have gone through great loss, people, one, are curious. And that's fine. I'm curious, right? But we know that people in our community, they're cheering for us, right? They want us to be okay. They want us to continue to have full lives. We've got 2 brilliant daughters and, the 2 best Labrador retrievers in the world, which means they're horribly behaved, but we love them. And so people want to know, right? And it's not about throwing it all out there and saying, walking people through every moment of your life, or, I'm from Louisiana, I'm from the South, so, discretion still creeps in. But I think part of what our friends and community need to know and what helps us is the realness and the messiness of it. So, if I'm feeling something, like I'm not afraid to cry in public. I won't hide that. Do I sit in a business meeting across from a client and break down in tears? No, right? You got to meet the moment a little bit. Maybe go to the bathroom and pull yourself together. But, the very worst thing that anybody said to me since my son Charlie died, I was at a social function. It was like a luncheon. I was seeing people. It was about a year after he died. And I just was overcome with grief, started to get teary, not anything major, but, that little puddly feeling in the corners of your eyes. And someone said, don't cry. Don't cry. Don't cry here. Well, that made me so mad. I mean,
how dare you?
For you. And also, if you've been through what I've been through, and, I'm sorry, I give myself permission to cry. And I'm sorry it makes you uncomfortable, but I'm really not sorry. You could go sit on the other side of the table. And so it turned into actually an empowering moment, because instead of saying, oh, this is so embarrassing, and so is, trying to make sure that I don't, make a fool of myself in front of these people, like, I'm not worried about making a fool of myself. The worst has already happened, right?
Yeah, totally. And that just goes to show, anytime we like speak up or our authentic selves, it's going to trigger someone that is not aware of or embracing or neglecting that part of themselves, right? So it's really revealing. Yeah. So you being your authentic self is actually liberating, triggering, but eventually liberating and healing for people. I would love for you to walk us through how you navigated the, potential guilt and shame of having a child die by suicide, that I would assume is inevitable. All the what ifs. I had a friend who committed suicide, and it was the same kind of thing. Like his funeral, he had groups of friends. Like he had a vibrant social life. There was just no way for us to know the depths of his despair. But that didn't stop us from just going back and walking through, like, what if I had probed more? What if I had, done more?
Yeah, I mean, it is it's a part of my life now, forever. And, this is a conversation I'll continue to have with myself and with my therapists. I don't want to brag, but I have two, and my friends and family. And, to me, it boils down to this really fundamental thing that is not a new concept, but when I apply it to my grief and my healing, this is what I'm working with and toward. And it's that it's up to you to develop the story you tell yourself. And the story you tell yourself, I think, in order to support healing and growth, has to be brutally honest. There is no room for saying, I just can't think about that, or I don't want to go there, or that hurts too much, because otherwise that story has falsehoods in it or incompletions. And so for me, healing has been an exercise in crafting that story. And it has required going there. I mean, like, there, like the worst, the darkest, the what ifs never end. You have to, like, I've just accepted. And they still pop up. I'm having dinner with my husband. I'm like, do you think that if maybe we had gone to Texas that week, or do you think if maybe, he hadn't gone to that college? I mean, it will never end. So we don't fight the what ifs. We go with them. And then you kind of talk them through to take them as far as you can. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable. Sometimes you go, well, maybe I could have made a difference, or there could have been a factor that could have shifted the trajectory. Because for a lot of people who die by suicide, they are suffering for a long time. But from what I understand, the decision is very quick. And so you go there, you explore all the what ifs. Some of them have to be very personal. Some of them can be more open. And you land on the story that works for you. I am not Charlie's biographer. I am not trying to come up with the historical account of his life and his strengths and weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And I'm not doing forensics. I mean, I do forensics on his every decision, conversation, interaction, anything that could have sort of set him one way or another. That doesn't do anybody good, any good. What I have to do is saying, this is what I know about my son. This is what I know about myself and our family. And this is how I think it all came together. Now, interestingly, two things. That story shifts a little, the more perspective I have and the more, sometimes I have conversations with people like you, or, where it's like, oh, that's an interesting way to think of it. Let me noodle on that. Let me see if it fits into my story. I'm a voracious reader. I read, I listen, so there's always new information coming in. So accepting that this is not like a solid roadmap. It grows as we grow. But then the other piece is, when you think about the family structure, one of the things that people said, close friends, immediately was, we care about your family. We want your family to try and stay intact because it is hard to hold it together after a child dies. There's numbers about this. It's hard. And we have realized that my story that I tell myself is a little different than the story my husband tells himself, and is a little different than what each of his sisters think, and his roommates that were in the house with him when he died, and his friends that were with him the night before, hours before he died. Everyone has to land on their own story. That is their own truth. And they're all valid because that truth has to be, at its essence, how do you go on? And so you do have choices. I mean, I, again, believe you have to be totally honest about it. But if you want to blame yourself for everything, if that is the story you land on, then that's the story you're going to carry. And you're going to have negativity, you're going to have tension, you're going to probably physically shut down. My therapist has a long-time patient who lost a son to suicide about 10 years ago. And this woman comes in, she has depression, anxiety, agoraphobia. She has heart problems. She has muscle aches. She has back pain. She has headaches. She can't sleep. Okay. She goes in to talk to a doctor about all these things, and she wants to get antidepressants and sleep medicines and all these things. Totally understandable. Big fan. Anything that can help. But she never talks about her son. She never talks about that loss. The only reason my therapist knows this is because of the intake information. She wrote it once and that's it. How? Of course it's having a physical effect on her body. And that I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. I actually kind of understand. I mean, you really bundle up. You crawl in after this kind of loss. But at some point you say, how is this affecting me? And do I really want to feel this way? And I knew even in the numbness and the oversaturated and overwhelmed state of early grief, I was like, oh, I can't feel like this for the next 30 years. I can't. So I made it my job to figure out how to heal.
Beautiful. In your story, you talk about sending the kids to camp in Texas Hill Country. And obviously I cannot help but think what just transpired weeks ago. And I can't even fathom that as a parent. Like, oh, these poor girls. What advice, based on your voracious reading and just dissecting every grief book on the planet, what advice would you give those mothers and parents and family members of that are just embarking on this, loss of the life?
This is hard. My children all went to summer camp on the Guadalupe. My grandparents lived in Kerrville. So I grew up going there. We have friends who have beautiful ranches there. And for about 10, 12 years of my children's life, we went back and forth several times a summer. Like, the Guadalupe is summer. And then camp was transformative for all of our children. And, just the independence, the being away from technology, for them being away from people, because we were coming from Virginia into Texas. So they were meeting this whole new cohort. And the growth and the independence was incredible. And yet it's hard to leave your children in the care of others. And it's hard to be separated from your children, particularly at a tender age. Ours started going at 9. And, it's a sacrifice you make, and you do it for a greater good. So to have that obliterated by a natural disaster that was, by all accounts, far worse than anybody could have imagined. I I can put together pieces in my mind of where I think those parents might be between understanding the importance and the rituals around camp life and losing a child, but that they are in a very unique spot. And so, the only thing that I can say, it's not a parallel experience, but losing my son, then my mother-in-law 3 weeks later, and then my dog 3 weeks later, what that forced me to face it. There was no getting around it. And when you just face it head on and you say, this is it, this is my life now. And you say, I have other children, or I have my spouse, or I have my parents, or I have my friends. I mean, there are people down there who lost multiple family members. That is, accept it for being the outlier human experience that it is. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody a good mood or bravery or, fake it till you make it. You only owe yourself. I was very selfish in my grief because I think it came bam, bam, bam. It's like, okay, this is it. Everything dies. Everything around me is got a termination point. And so I had to look and say, well, what does that mean for me? How do I live? How do I grow? How to continue to be curious? So, to me, this loss that I experience, and I think this loss that these families are experiencing, regardless of their circumstance and relationship to the river and the flood and the camps, is, do whatever you can to heal. And that looks different for different people. And within our own family, even, I just immersed myself in it. That doesn't mean I sat around all day and did nothing, but I read. I actually didn't leave the house very much, but I had to deal with agoraphobia. I had therapy to help make sure that I didn't become too withdrawn. But I had one daughter whose method was to live, to go out and to have fun and find joy. She was 23, so she's in the heart of that, right? And, she would surround herself with people and surround herself with distractions. And I had another daughter who went completely inward, and she journaling and meditating and stretching and, full on. And then my husband, he had to be, he had to be strong, get up, go about his days, go into work, see his friends, come back, and he would fall apart when he got home. Those are all valid ways to deal with it. The only warning I would give, and I'm not a practitioner, I can't really give advice, but we all had to be very aware that some of our coping strategies, there is a moment where they can turn on you. So for me, it helps me to be in my sanctuary, to be surrounded by my dogs, and we got new dogs, and, my things and Charlie's things and in my garden. It helped me, but there became a point where it became dangerous because it was like, I was losing the ability to interact with other people and to face uncomfortable or potentially uncomfortable situations. And so I had to start to gently nudge outward. And that is covered in detail in the book. When I say gently nudge outward, I mean things like driving to a different part of town. I mean things like picking up Chipotle, by myself. Mm-hmm. These are not big things. So there is, and, my daughter, who went inward and went into journaling, had to kind of take a similar path. Like, you got to be a little uncomfortable every day. And then the others who were more outgoing, my husband and my other daughter, they had to learn to sit with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you're talking, I just feel like there is, when you're present and when you're in your process, then there comes a point where things shift, and there's just, I feel that there's an energy, there's a life force, there's a, row gently down the river. There's a river of life that is pushing us, and to resist it, may put you ending up in the position of that other client of the therapist, who doesn't deal and is, and it's manifesting in physical symptoms. And it seems like you felt that shift and started to nudge in a different direction and out of it. So that's part of the process of grief.
Yes.
Recently, I was reminded how our bodies are always speaking to us, whether it's fatigue, pain, inflammation, fever, brain fog. There's always something deeper going on that's trying to get our attention. For me, that meant taking a step back and getting honest about how I am not supporting my body as well as I should be. And when I did, I realized I needed to up my daily detox rituals and up-level some habits and lifestyle a bit. Therasage makes it easy to do both. Robbie Bessner, the founder of Therasage, was recently on the Heal with Kelly podcast, and I just love how they've designed their products thoughtfully and with the highest integrity. When I use their infrared sauna or their red light therapy, which I love, it's not just about detox. It's about creating space to come home to myself. And that, to me, is the real medicine. If you're feeling the call to support your body in a deeper way, check out Therasage. Therasage is offering our Heal with Kelly community a very generous 25% off all their products. Just use code KELLY at checkout when you go to therasage.com. That's code KELLY, KELLY, when you visit THERASAGE.com. I'm curious how your overall spiritual beliefs have changed in the aftermath of this. Like, what were they before and what are they now? Have they changed?
So I've always been kind of an all of the above spiritual. I like aspects of a lot of different faiths. I believe in a higher power, and for me, some people would call it cherry picking, and any kind of loss or tragedy or big change inevitably forces you to look at that. And, we think about our place in the world. We think about our purpose. We think about our ability to shape our path and our future. And there are so many different ways to live. So my spiritual life is a little bit like how I handled, my grief, which is to be very aware of where I am and what's working for me. So I go through periods where all I can think about is where Charlie is now. And the role, what does that look like for me? Right? And so that inevitably makes you think about, the afterlife and what that looks like and how we define it. And I pretty quickly realize no one knows. So then you come back to the story you tell yourself that helps you. And another person's vision of the afterlife will be very different than mine. But I come to what gives me comfort. And it gives me comfort to know that Charlie's out there. I believe he is energy that has not gone. It's taken a different shape. I find great comfort in the idea that he's with people that he loves, family members. He's lost grandparents. He's also, a couple of friends of his have died since he died. And the idea of them together, it actually makes me smile. So that's where I am. That's where I focus on him. Knowing full and well, just about everybody I meet is going to have a different interpretation with that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Like, I respect other interpretations, but my grief, my child, and my ability to move forward, that's what I'm focused on. Again, it's a little selfish, but for me, that is how I can interact in the world. You know, I don't tell anybody else what to think or believe.
It's finding what works for you and being okay with that, allowing your beliefs. What are the beliefs that serve you and align with your energy, and it's uplifting, it's vitality giving to come up with that story and go, yeah, that feels right for me.
Right. Which is why, and however you get there, if it's because you were raised in a church and it has always made sense to you and provided you comfort, and then go with it. That's great. That's what it's for. We're all trying to understand our place in the world. We're all trying to understand, you know, why we matter and how we can be our best self, and whatever vehicle you have for that is, you know, it's all legit. It's all valid.
Yeah. Yes. I learned in COVID. It's like, don't try to convince anybody of the beliefs that are opposite of what they believe, because they are so ingrained and married to their beliefs.
Yeah.
It infuriated me in the book. And this is not to pass judgment on anybody, but the person that came to the door and was trying to kind of recruit you into a different belief system with the best of intentions to save the souls of you and your son. And you handled it with such grace. But yes, I believe, like, find what works for you and let everybody do themselves, you know, especially in a moment of grief. Like, don't try to help too much. Let people do their thing.
Right.
You know, you talk about the lies that depression tells us. Depression is a big through line because it not only was your son's disease, but it was you've had bouts of depression. And I would love for you to speak to, God, you have such a beautiful letter to parents in the back of the book at the end. And I would maybe read a couple pieces to it, but it's I would love for you to just speak to the lies that depression tells, and then how for young people, it's so important to know that their prefrontal cortex is not developed yet. So the lies land deeper, and that's what we're experiencing with this epidemic of mental health crisis in adolescents.
Yeah. It is. So I've had depression on and off for most of my life. I've had anxiety, had therapy in and out of therapy for a variety of things related to depression and anxiety, sometimes just stress. And I've always felt like I was a pretty informed consumer, you know. I had the support of my parents when I was struggling, and my partner, but also really tried to foster that in my own household. This was not a secretive thing. And yet, and Charlie's sisters, and this is in the book, they know I'm talking about this. They both have had their struggles, particularly when they were in high school and early college, that kind of prime time. And we were, as a family, we knew, I mean, they were very outward and vocal and, loud and slamming doors and, about their struggles and their therapy. And I just figured that Charlie, because he was a part of that unit and it was never secretive or even dismissed, that he was getting this information by proxy, and his mood, he was always calm. He was always easygoing. He was quiet, but not shy. So he's the kind of guy that like chimes in when he has something to say. Kind of a wicked sense of humor. But he was also a great listener. And he was the one that people turned to when they were struggling. And in fact, the night before he died, he'd been out with friends. It was summer. They went out to bars and were having a good time. And then they all went back to his house. He lived in a group house and they're hanging around and playing cards and playing pool and talking until late to the night. And there was a friend of his that lived across the street, but that he'd known since high school. And this friend was kind of stressed out about some things and, kind of saying, what do I do? And was a little overwhelmed. And Charlie said, well, whatever you're feeling now, it's going to pass. Whatever you need, I am here for you. I am across the street. Call me anytime. I've known you a long time. So that sounds like someone who understands. We knew he was struggling at that point, but he was getting help. He was making plans. He was going out. He was exercising. He was working, so you're like, okay, he's all right.
He was given the advice that we would give to him.
Right.
That you would give to him. Yeah.
Right. And within hours, he killed himself. So what I've learned is just how powerful depression's lies can be. So understandably, one of the main symptoms of depression is that it slows things down, right? A lot of people sleep too much, or they don't have energy, or they're not motivated. But when you look externally, that's a calming thing. And maybe you can see the sadness, or you can see the mood, or detect it. He's not laughing as much. He's not as excited about that thing that they used to be excited about. But so depression has this image of just being calm, which I think unfortunately makes it easy to conflate with weakness. Well, if it's calm, you can handle it. And I learned, and this is what I would tell parents, nothing could be farther from the truth. Because depression is strong. It is relentless. And it is sneaky. So you have a person who sees the picture, who understands that their brain's playing tricks on them and telling them there's no point in going on and telling them that they should give up, but they can see it. They are like, nope, I can deal with this. I'm better than this. I've got a lot to live for. I have a vacation with my best friends next week. I'm going to be there. And then you can wake up or have a bad conversation or have a moment of sadness and you just say, no. Because when you get down to it, if you think about our instinct to survive is the most fundamental thing we have, right? If someone throws you into a swimming pool unexpectedly, you are going to pop up and do whatever you can to protect yourself. It takes a lot to override that survival instinct. A lot. How strong does depression have to be to override your survival instinct? To tell your brain, nope, not only is there no point in living, but you need to be the one to take care of this. How powerful is that disease? And in this sense, I feel like suicide is not really a choice. It is the outcome of a very serious illness. And obviously depression it's a huge spectrum, I live with it day in, day out. Most people can live with it and be very high functioning, if not have a full life. But sometimes it's too much. And that's what I want people to understand, that sometimes you just have to say, we need to put everything we have into finding steady ground.
So knowing that you've navigated through it many, many times, and, this movement that I think arose from Charlie's passing with the wristbands that says, check on your friends. I still feel like we're unequipped. Like, even if we check on our friends, there's that moment where he was seemingly fine, to the fact so robust that he was helping a friend and texting his sisters about the trip that they were going to take. He was making plans for the future. He was up and healthy and having fun with his friends, giving advice. Like, I feel helpless. Even if you check on your friends, I feel helpless. Like, what can we do?
I wish that I had a different answer to that question. Yeah. But it is terrifying to think that sometimes there isn't anything you can do. Just like sometimes if your child is sick and you're getting them the best medical care, they're still not going to make it. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just one way to view it. And, and so all you can do is try and understand this, foster conversations. I really think that having hard conversations is a muscle that you have to exercise. And this starts when we're very young. It could be delivering bad news to your parents. I didn't get the grade on the test that I thought I would. Or, when as a child, you get called out for, doing something you knew you weren't supposed to. How the parent has that conversation that fosters honesty and accountability, whatever your discipline style is, whatever it doesn't matter. It needs to be a safe place. You need to be able to admit you're wrong, you're struggling, you made a mistake, you're overwhelmed. I think a lot of teenagers and young adults, a lot of it is just they're so overwhelmed, but they don't know how to talk about it, so they don't. And they may not be thinking, well, I'm depressed and therefore I'm having all these terrible thoughts. They think something's wrong with me. So having the skills and the practice and the muscle to be vulnerable and say, I don't even know what's going on with me, but I am having such a hard time. And then for the adults involved or the friends involved to be able to just hear that information and to let them explain what's going on with them to the extent they can. They may not even be able to say much, but to be supportive in that as opposed to, well, you need to do this. You need to get more exercise. You need to eat better. You need to study harder. Just finish the football season. Oh, well, we're going on vacation next week. Hear them. Hear them. Don't tell them all the things they need to do instead. That's where you have to start. And that's really hard for a lot of parents because all we want to do is tell their kids what to do.
Is help and fix and, and remove their suffering, you know?
And for me, having been through depression before, I was like, I had it all spelled out. It's in that letter that I gave to him that basically said, this is what I've learned. I've learned that this is just a small part of your brain and it gets really loud sometimes, but don't give it the power that it doesn't deserve. It's an illness. You know, you can do it. Keep it in check. And he carried that letter with him. He knew, he understood that. He expressed to people, I've got to shut down this bad part. And it was still too much for him.
You know, you talk about this time in the book where you were at a kid's birthday party. You were, you know, as you do with 3 young kids, like scanning the pool, making sure that you're like keeping tabs of your kids. And you saw a girl sinking to the bottom. You saved her. You know, it was a really dramatic account, but you saved this girl's life. And such beautiful moments. You were like, you know, ironically, that made me a less fearful parent after that. Cause I was like, you know, I was there. I was the hero. I'm vigilant. I got this. And also, you know what? I earned a little asterisk in God's eye. Like I just deposited some really good karma. My kids are going to be protected kind of belief, which is exactly subconsciously or consciously like what I would believe too.
Yeah.
And there was a boy who died recently from a drunk driver in my neighborhood. A stand-up family. He was a stellar kid. He was going to go to University of Virginia. He's captain of the tennis team. You know, Braun.
I heard about that.
You're shaking your head. Yeah, you're nodding your head. His family, you know, dad's a pediatric heart surgeon. Like they're just this like stellar, good, you know, blue ribbon family. And it just jarred me to my core that this is the kid that his life was ended prematurely before, you know, and he had everything going for him. And I don't know why that hit me harder, but I think on a subconscious level, as I was reading your book, it made me realize like I have, because of my own upbringing, perfectionism and like striving to survive through performance and success and achievement, it's like all of that is for naught. Like none of it matters. Like you could be the best kid in the world from the best family and this shit happens. And it rocked me to my core because I felt like even though I have tremendous faith, even in the fact that like Charlie's soul came here for a reason and is in this beautiful, brilliant, expanded place, and that energy never dies. Like you said, it just takes a different form. And like, because of everything you describe, I just know that like it was all meant to be somehow, that like life path and choice, because it just doesn't make sense. And the Braun doesn't make sense. And so it's like, but it rocks you to your core of your belief going, well, like, what is it all for? And what, like, I can't, like, what is my striving and achievement and perfectionism and like being so good for? And it just really makes you think. And your book made me think in that way too, you know, and Charlie's life and Charlie's silent struggle and he was just such this like great kid, you know, it's wild to process.
It is wild and it's humbling. That is right away. I mean, this is the most humbling experience, but then you get up and you try and hold your head high. I had to work on that. I realized I was slouching like this. I had to make a conscious effort to hold my head high. I am who I am. My life is my life. And I can't change the fact that Charlie's gone. I won't ever understand it. I won't ever understand why that young man sitting on a beach with his life ahead of him is killed. I mean, talk about needless. But everywhere you look, there are people carrying similar questions. No one is immune from struggle, hardship, loss, and it takes so many different forms. But it's overwhelming, but it's also reassuring to know that the person sitting across from you on the subway has had their loss. And the person that you ride up in the elevator with has had their loss. And the person you depend on for your own care and well-being, a doctor or a therapist, has had their loss. And look at us. Look at us. We're doing it. We're doing it. And so that's where I do come back to me and say, you know, your point about what's the point? I'm trying to be a good person and a good citizen and a good mother and a good friend and what's the point if this kind of stuff can still happen? Mm-hmm. And the point is, everywhere around you, someone has a struggle. And I think it's up to us individually to operate in the world that we want. And so if we want peace and quiet and harmony and love and support, then we can't run around with a baseball bat in our hand, swinging at everything that pisses us off. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, it's great because you feel better about yourself and your life. And you can, you know, sit with yourself and you can smile with your friends and you can enjoy new things. And I mean, like, it just, you know, sounds very 70s hippie-ish, but, you know, put out love, put out support, including to yourself. And that's hard. I don't always give myself grace. You know, I know I didn't cause this. I know there's very little I could have done realistically to change this, but I'm the mom. I do not let myself off the hook because moms don't let themselves off the hook. But I've accepted that as my personal battle. That doesn't have to be anything the world has to share with me.
Well, it does. I mean, I just want to acknowledge your courage for being so open about your journey, because this is, like I said, worst thing that anybody could go through. And you sharing your story here, you sharing your story in this brilliant book that, again, is for anybody dealing with loss and grief and or depression, which is so many people. This book is for everybody, or people that are close to people dealing with depression. Because there was one thing that you say, and this says, a letter to parents like me. It's the last thing you write before the acknowledgments. You say, remember that depression is sneaky. It's possible to have good times and good days and think the disease has run its course, but suicidal thoughts can come quickly, which is especially dangerous for people under the age of 26 whose prefrontal cortexes are not fully developed. If someone you love is at risk, you must stay on top of it, even when they say they feel better. Remove even the smallest obstacles to receiving care. Even low-grade depression can have a huge impact on motivation, executive functioning, and decision-making. A sick person can know they need professional help and want professional help, but taking the steps to obtain that help can feel insurmountable. And you go on to say that, like, even if they say, call back during business hours, or that therapist is not available for 6 months, that because it took so much motivation for them to take that step, that is a slap in the face and a personal rejection they might feel that can set them back. So, I mean, it's such a powerful resource for not only parents dealing with loss or anybody dealing with loss or grief, but anybody that's touching someone with depression or themselves. So
I hope it provide some insight. I wish people didn't need books like this, but, starting at the center, which is loss by suicide, but going out to losing a child, losing someone you love, or trying to support someone in those situations. I wrote the book while I was going through these experiences, not in hindsight. And the reason I did that was certainly helped me in my healing, but also because There's no one right way. This is not a prescription, but it's hard to know what to do for yourself or to support friends or family. And so hopefully there is perspective about any type of grief. I think about these hill country families every day, all day. I can see them. I know what they've been through, and just if you're looking for perspective, there may be some things in there that are helpful.
For you to write this while you're going through it is truly heroic, because I know what it takes to write a book. And when you're dealing with grief and on top of that, depression that comes and goes, that is a heroic effort. So it's truly a gift to the world. I just want one more question if you have the time. So what tools have helped you, because you've been dealing with depression and anxiety on and off your whole life, besides, medication and therapy? What tools that have you learned get you through depression or out of depression?
So, nothing revolutionary about this, but again, this is what works for me. Outside of therapy and sometimes medication. I haven't always used a medication. Sunshine. I think it's a good thing. I work from home and I have a beautiful garden. And so I go outside several times a day just to walk around. It doesn't have to be some concentrated thing. Having something outside of yourself that is a way for you to express yourself or make decisions or show creativity. For me, it's my garden. So it is hard work, and there's a lot about how important it is to do things with your hands, like to produce something, and gardening is a way to do that. You plant the seeds, you prune the bushes, whatever. That in and of itself is a good thing, but it's mine. And for me, juggling career and family and all this, I go to the garden and it is mine. No one's telling me where to put anything. No one's asking why there's more of this than that. It's mine. So that, for me, maybe I have control issues, but that was very, you see how that comes out. And it's this beautiful act of faith. You plant something, you don't know how it's going to do, and then it comes up and, oh my gosh, life is great, I am a walker, so I'm committed to walking, exercise, fresh air, whatever flavor you have. I think it's important. And I think the thing that has been the difference maker for me personally, because with depression, I have this overlay of anxiety, particularly social anxiety, where you're overthinking everything. You're afraid of who you might see. You're afraid of the decisions you might have to make. You're certain that if you're in a situation that's uncomfortable, you're going to handle it poorly and it's going to ruin everything. So then you get in these crazy loops where you're second guessing. And my therapist had the best analogy, and it happens to do with gardening. And that, I think, has helped me not just with anxiety, but with my life, just as a human, trying to always be growing and learning. And that is, do something that makes you feel uncomfortable every day.
Practicing, exercising.
Yep. So when you're in deep grief, like I was, uncomfortable is getting out of bed, right? I don't want to do this. But then you have to realize, well, that's not good enough anymore. You need to walk out the front door, not the back door where you can hide, but the front door. You need to say yes to that person who says, I'd like to come over. Are you there? totally fine to say no. But at some point, you got to say yes. You know, people would ask me to do things with them. No, 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 no. At some point, you go, all right, I'm going to do that. And for me, that has started so small. I had one friend who said, will you just ride in my car with me? And we just rode up and down the highway. That's where I was. But my therapist described it as, think of these anxieties and these fears as weeds that have tendrils, and they're growing in your brain. And the only way to stop them from growing is to snip them. Snip them. And the way that you snip them is to do something that scares you every day. Like, that just made so much sense to me. So then it becomes this personal challenge. And remember, I feel like shit. I don't want to do anything. Honestly, I still don't want to do anything. If somebody said, hey, do you want to go walk on the waterfront? I go, no, I don't want to. But can I? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. I know it'd be good to have company. I know it's good to be outside. I know it'll benefit me. So if I am capable of it, I will do it, even if I don't like it. And that was
snip the tendrils.
Snip the tendrils. And that was a huge shift for me, because everything is like, oh, I'm exercising self-care. I'm not pushing myself. I'm sitting with my feelings. Well, you know what? At some point, that's not self-care. So do you want to? Can you? What makes you a little uncomfortable? Do it.
I love such great advice. And I think, and you mentioned this before, but it's finding that balance between that self-care and nurturing, and not forcing yourself and not trying to perform for anybody or push through something too fast, and being with the feelings. And then also having that realization that, you've got to snip the tendrils. And you got to exercise it a little when you're ready, every day.
Some of us were there. They were more comfortable going out and being out and surrounding my people. So the thing that scared them was to sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks different for all of us. You need to come home and you need to get off your phone and you need to just feel what you feel. Or you need to have a conversation with someone you trust and just let it go there. Everybody's different. But being aware of what that little thing is, that's the medicine.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for showing up, probably not wanting to today, and being exposed and very, put out in the world. Yeah. But again, just I so honor you for your courage and this heroic effort to write this book while you're in it in order to help others. And what a gift, I just want to honor Charlie too, and everything that he's doing to help others as well in his memories. So thank you again. And where can people find you and Blackbird?
So the book Blackbird is available anywhere books are sold. So you can buy it online. You can buy it from Amazon, bookshop.org if you like to support independent bookstores, which is always a good thing. And you can go to your local bookstore and they can order it. It's available in paperback, Kindle, and audio. So, I do all three. I like consuming books in all those ways. I also have a website, blackbirdbetsy.com, where I've got some resources, a little bit more about me and Charlie. And I am also on Instagram on blackbirdbetsy21. So, and I get messages all the time and I try to return them all, and, kind of, we're in it together, we learn from each other. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you.